Hi boys and girls, it's Mrs. Sewell here. I've come to read you a story today, and this is one of my favourite stories that you may have seen. It's called The Whale Song by Diane Sheldon and Gary Blythe. It's a really beautiful story with some excellent illustrations, and I first read it at Thirlby about 8 years ago when I did my very first assembly with Key Stage 1. So I thought I'd share it with you today. I hope you enjoy it. Lily's grandmother told her a story. Once upon a time, she said, the ocean was filled with whales. They were as big as the hills. They were as peaceful as the moon. They were the most wondrous creatures you could ever imagine. Lily climbed onto her grandmother's lap. I used to sit at the end of the jetty and listen for the whales, said Lily's grandmother. Sometimes I'd sit there all day and all night. Then all of a sudden I'd see them coming from miles away. They moved through the water as if they were dancing. But how did they know you were there, Grandma? Asked Lily. How would they find you? Lily's grandmother smiled. Oh, you had to bring them something special, a perfect shell or a beautiful stone. And if they liked you, the whales would take your gift and give you something in return. What would they give you, Grandma? Asked Lily. What did you get from the whales? Lily's grandmother sighed. Once or twice, she whispered. Once or twice, I heard them sing. Lily's Uncle Frederick stomped into the room. You're nothing but a daft old fool, he snapped. Whales were important for their meat and for their bones and for their blubber. If you have to tell Lily something, then tell her something useful. Don't fill her head with nonsense. Singing whales indeed. There were whales here millions of years before there were ships or cities or even cavemen, continued Lily's grandmother. People used to say they were magical. People used to eat them and boil them down for oil, grumbled Lily's Uncle Frederick, and he turned his back and stomped out into the garden. Lily dreamt about whales. In her dreams she saw them as large as mountains and bluer than the sky. In her dreams she heard them singing, their voices like the wind. In her dreams they leapt from the water and called her name. Next morning, Lily went down to the ocean. She went where no one fished or swam or sailed their boats. She walked to the end of the old jetty. The water was empty and still. Out of her pocket, she took a yellow flower and dropped it in the water. This is for you, she called into the air. Can you see that yellow flower, boys and girls, just dropping into the water? Lily sat at the end of the jetty and waited. She waited and she waited all morning and all afternoon. Then, as dusk began to fall, Uncle Frederick came down. Enough of this foolishness, he said. Come on home. I'll not have you dreaming your life away. That night, Lily awoke suddenly. The room was bright with moonlight. She sat up and listened. The house was quiet. Lily climbed out of bed and went to the window. She could hear something in the distance on the far side of the hill. What do you think it might be, boys and girls? Shall we find out? She raced outside and down to the shore. Her heart was pounding as she reached the sea. There, enormous in the ocean, were the whales. They leapt and jumped and spun across the moon. Their singing filled up the night, and Lily saw her yellow flower dancing on the spray. Can you spot the yellow flower? It's just here. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Suddenly, Lily felt the breeze rustle her nightdress and the cold nip at her toes. She shivered and rubbed her eyes. Then it seemed the ocean was still again and the night black and silent. Lily thought she must have been dreaming. She stood up and turned for home. Then from far, far away, on the breath of the wind, she heard, "Lily, Lily." The whales were calling her name. So, boys and girls, that was one of my favourite stories, The Whale Song. I hope you enjoyed it just as much as I do. And maybe we can read another story together another time. Bye for now.